This story divides people. It's political, it's personal, and it's a thorn in so many people's sides. So, I'm asking you, when you listen to this story, to put aside the political part and actually just listen to the human story that's being told, and actually think about the human being involved in the story. And maybe that's not possible for everyone. But with this story, I wanted to tell this because I have to be just human about this. I know we all live different lives, and we all do different things, and we all believe different things. We all deem different things to be important. I get that. But surely in life we can agree on this. The one person who stands up when they see wrongdoing and says no, something is wrong, surely they are the bravest of people, and they need to be supported and celebrated. And I find myself wondering and asking and questioning, would you do it? If you saw something that was really wrong happening, would you stand up and say something? Would I do it? I'm asking this question of myself. I would love to think that we would all be the person who stood up. Resilient, independent, resourceful, unbreakable, fragile, tortured, dehumanized. I was kicked out of my home, and I once lost my job. The world is not moving fast enough for us, at home, in work, or on the battlefield. And I've been living a double life. I can't make a statement. I can't be caught up in the act, and I hope that the public support for me changes. Welcome to Extraordinary Stories Podcast. Hey, how are you? Are you well? Are you good? I am. Lovely to be back with you with another episode. Thank you for all of your wonderful correspondence. Honestly, I get the most amazing things. Now, if I haven't got back to you, I will. It's just, there's a lot coming at me, and I'm just getting through it bit by little bit by bit. But I'll get back to you if you've got in touch with me. What else? Oh yeah, so brilliant to see so many people with merchandise and see your photographs. It's really great to see. It's really not to sound like a dick saying this, and I don't want to come across like a dick, but it's really overwhelming for me to see that. When I see like people wearing t-shirts and like the photographs of like people holding a water bottle or a notebook, I just get this weird like, oh, what? Like, to me, it all just feels a bit surreal. Do you know what I mean? And not to do like, I'm a hater of people who do fake humble, right? And it is not, believe me, it's not what I'm doing. It's just that weird thing of going, I just literally always believed that Extraordinary Stories podcast would be me telling a story to like one person who would listen. And so the merchandise thing for me is weird. Like, not kidding, I always thought, oh, if I ever get to the merchandise stage, it will be me painting a mug and sending it to the one listener who listens to the podcast. So yeah, it's really weird to see that. So yes, thank you. And hello and welcome to all new listeners, and there are a fair few of you. Quick shout out to the whole of America. Quick shout out to the whole of Australia, because you are doing great work at the moment, and the podcast is really spreading far and wide, and it's crazily climbing up the American charts, and it's climbing up the Australian charts, and I keep seeing all these like figures coming back at me, and I'm like, what the fuck? How is this happening? How are people listening? But I'll tell you how people are listening. It's because you're spreading the word, because you're telling people about it, and because you're downloading it and you're listening to it. And for that, I am very, very grateful. So thank you. Alright, this story. It is divisive. The actions of this person divide people, and, you know, it's the old actions speak louder than words. This is a strange tale, because you're dealing with someone's life and their journey in life. You're also dealing with the thing that this person did, and they become intertwined. You've got this sort of simultaneous what they did and who they are. Are you ready? Okay, let's go. So it's Oklahoma, and it's in 1987. Oklahoma, where the sun is bright. Like that's, I think that's from the musical. I might have just made those words up, but something like that. Anyway, a baby boy is born. And he's born to parents Brian and Susan. And when he's born in Oklahoma. But Brian and Susan are not both from there. Brian is. This is where Brian was born and raised. Susan, however, is Welsh. She was born in Wales. So she sort of talks like this because she is Welsh. She says, hello, I'm from Wales. That's... yeah, hello, I'm from Wales. Is this what people in Wales talk like? Yeah, it is. So she's Welsh. But Brian, born and raised in Oklahoma. Now, Brian is in the army. He is an intelligence analyst. And at a young age, he's in his mid-20s, he gets stationed overseas, and it's in Wales. And here he is, he's in Wales, and he goes into the local Woolworths. Remember Woolworths, the shop? Pretty sure Woolworths was global, wasn't it? It wasn't just a UK thing. Anyway, he goes into the local Woolworths. Why can't I say Woolworths properly? He goes into the local Woolworths, and there he meets Susan. Susan is early 20s, has been born and raised in this Welsh town, and the two of them, they just connect. They connect, and the relationship begins. I am right, am I not? Woolworths was not just a UK thing. I'm pretty sure you got it worldwide. Because was it not when it closed, there was like it was like a big, massive deal, because it actually turned out to be like, I don't know, an American company or something that owned it. Anyway, I don't know. The only thing I can tell you about Woolworths is that there was one near me when I was growing up, and that every Saturday afternoon I used to take my pocket money, go to Woolworths and buy a new song every week. And I used to love that so much. My dad used to like take me in every Saturday morning, and he would be like, right, okay, here's your pocket money, what do you want to buy? And I'd be like, ooh, the new Janet Jackson single, please. Ooh, the Rhythm Nation. And then we'd like get in the car and like come home after I'd spent my pocket money in Woolworths. But they kind of sold everything, didn't they? Sweets, clothes, whatever. So, Susan and Brian have met. And Brian, the time comes for him to go back to Oklahoma. And he says to Susan, come with me. Come back and we can make a life together in America. And she agrees. She says, yeah, okay, I'll come back with you. I'll start my life over there. So pretty quickly, Susan falls pregnant. And she falls pregnant with one of 2 children that her and Brian will have. And it's a daughter. And they call her Casey. So, they have Casey, and they're just going through their life. You know, Brian's sometimes taken away for work. Susan's very much at home, looking after the baby. And here they have baby Casey. Now, one major thing to know about Brian and Susan is that they both liked alcohol. And they liked alcohol a lot. They were big drinkers, and that includes during the time when Susan was pregnant with the first child, Casey. She drank entirely through the pregnancy. Now, what drinking brought about amongst the 2 of them was a fuckload of arguing and fighting and screaming and throwing things, and basically, what I'm trying to say, a very volatile relationship. It was very volatile between the 2 of them. So Casey gets to about 2 years old when Susan falls pregnant again. And this time, she will give birth to a baby boy, and they will call him Bradley. Again, throughout the pregnancy, the second one, Susan consumed a hell of a lot of alcohol. The relationship between Brian and Susan is bad. It's in a really bad place. I mean, the drinking thing aside, the fact that they've now got a 2-year-old and a baby just adds enormous, crazy amounts of pressure on their life. And to deal with that pressure, what they do is they turn to alcohol, which in turn leads to just more fighting and shouting and screaming at each other. So the kids, Casey, the older sister, and Bradley, the younger brother, as much as Susan and Brian try to care for the kids are quite often left to kind of fend for themselves. So as Bradley gets a bit older and he starts to become a toddler, his sister Casey gets to about 4 or 5 years old, and quite often it becomes her responsibility to start looking after her younger brother, to organise his food and to just make sure that he's been to the toilet and done all these things. And a lot of that, I just think, it's not really the job of a 4, 5-year-old sibling to have to make sure that your younger sibling has done that. But that's the way it was. That's the way the household was. Now, Brian and Susan, they'll tell you an entirely different story. They'll say, oh, we were as happy as Larry. We were the happiest family in the world. There was never a moment of strife under this roof. Bollocks. That's lies. There was. There just was. Susan, when the kids were about the age of about 8 and 6, started to consistently claim she was going to commit suicide. So in a fight with her husband, she would say, that's it, it's done, I'm going to kill myself tonight. And this became her kind of thing that she would use. She would say this all the time, right, that's it, I'm going to end this right now. She never did, but it was the threat, it was the very threat of it. So the kids, they don't talk about it an awfully lot. They don't really say what's going on at home until Bradley will tell a friend at school. And this is when he's about 8 or 9, and it's been going on since the day he was born. He will say to a friend at school, I have a really terrible home life. It's pretty horrible. And he sort of explains that, you know, his mum and dad drink a lot of alcohol and they fight an awful lot. Susan would just leave the kids, as I said earlier on, basically to fend for themselves, and often that meant she would be in such a drunken stupor the kids wouldn't go to school, and she didn't know they weren't at school because she might just be lying in her bed all day and the kids were just sort of roaming about doing their own thing. Brian, he still had his job within the army. I mean, he still, through his alcoholism, he still maintained his intelligence analyst position, but sometimes it meant that he was away from the house for like a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks at a time. He wasn't always around. So it was really left to Casey, the older sister, to bring up Bradley. You know, Brian in this situation, he's not blameless, but he's maybe slightly got a better grip on life than Susan does. He can drink, he can do all the stuff that Susan's doing, but he also manages to make it to his work. So when Brian was working away, what he would do is he would write out cheques for Casey to use for electricity and food, because otherwise the kids, well, they just wouldn't eat. And he knew that if he left money in the house to pay for, you know, the electricity bill or the gas bill or a food bill when he was away, basically Susan, his wife, would find that money and essentially she would drink it. So he left it, these cheques that were pre-signed, for Casey to take to a bank and pay the bills. How horrendous is that? How horrific that you have to go away. And I know he's not blameless, but he has to go away for work for, 3 weeks, 4 weeks at a time. And what he has to do is leave for his 12-year-old daughter some pre-signed cheques so that the family can actually eat, they can actually have heat, and they can actually have lighting, because he can't leave money behind because it will all just get spent on alcohol. In a way, this bit of the story is incredibly important, because going back to those words that I listed in the beginning, these will play a massive part. Those words: resilience, solitude, independence, resourcefulness. Those words very much describe those two kids in that family. I mean, to be fair, they're the same words I would associate with myself: resilient, solitude, independence, resourcefulness. I mean, I might add a couple to it. What would I add? Flamboyant might be one that I might add. And sex god. Flamboyant sex god. That's what I would add to that, and then that would definitely be a brilliant description. So, the kids grow up with their own different kind of interests, as much as they can have an interest in things outside of what's going on in their family. One thing that Bradley has is an interest in computers, and that is like hours and hours spent learning different computer games, different computer programs. I know like some kids are just like kind of brilliant at that kind of thing, aren't they? They just like see those like computer games, or they see those like things, and they just know how to do it. It's like, it's unbelievable when you look at like the things that like an 11-year-old can do on a computer, you know, in terms of getting into sites and getting into doing all that sort of stuff. That just like baffles me. I still have to bloody reset my password for every site I ever go into about 1,000 times a day. I'm like, oh, once more I have forgot my password, and once more I have to click the button that says, I am not a robot. I'm not a fucking robot. Stop making me click the button. Or the one I fucking hate is when you get the 9 squares and it's like, click everything that's got a traffic light in it. I never ever seem to hit the right bloody squares on that thing, and then it thinks I'm a robot and it kicks me back out, and I have to bloody such a fucking, so annoying, so bloody annoying. Anyway, I think that's my own personal admin that I need to get better at. So at school, Bradley and his friends, because Bradley's very, very, very good with computers, and he's sort of gravitated towards friends who are also good with computers, they're setting up like message board sites where they can write messages to each other, and they can find people and they can make them a friend, and when they are friends they can send things to each other. Does this sound familiar? Yes. Bradley was in the very early days when it was still things like MySpace. He was essentially right in there at the very beginning of what would become Facebook in the end. Now, he wasn't part of actually building what Facebook is. That was Steve Gutenberg, or whatever he's called. This is not Steve Gutenberg. What's his name? Steve Gutenberg. Yeah, he's the guy. The Facebook guy. He's not him, but what I'm saying is Bradley was really like into that sort of like messaging thing within computers. So while his family life is absolutely bollocks, the 12-year-old Bradley, he's actually starting to win prizes at school for computer skills, because he's just phenomenal at it. And teachers are starting to recognise Bradley as very, very, very bright. You know, he's really, really, really smart. Now, the marriage between his mum and his dad is just getting worse. There is more drinking, there's more fighting, and Brian is spending longer and longer periods of time away from the home. He just doesn't want to be there because Susan's alcoholism is just out of control. And as much as I'm sure Brian probably really wanted, you know, to give his kids a better life, I think he was maybe a bit trapped in that he was also a drinker, but not to the level that his wife was. And so, at age 12 for Bradley, Brian and Susan announced that they are going to get divorced. And you remember I said Susan had threatened to attempt suicide. Well, once Brian and Susan have announced their divorce, Susan actually goes through with it. She takes a bottle of pills, she goes upstairs in the house, and she downs those pills with a bottle of vodka. Now, while this is happening, Bradley, his older sister, and Brian are downstairs in the living room. And when they realise that she has attempted to kill herself, they realise they have to get her to the hospital as soon as possible. But Brian is far, far too drunk to be able to drive the car. However, this is what the teenage daughter in the family does. She drags Brian, her dad, into the car. She puts him at the steering wheel. She makes him put both hands on it. She puts Bradley in the back of the car. She puts her mum's overdosed body on top of Bradley, and she makes them drive to the hospital. Now, pretty much the whole entire way there, she's holding the steering wheel. This teenage girl is like basically holding her drunk dad up, getting them to the hospital, and Bradley is in the back of the car with his mum, who has overdosed. Now, they get to the hospital. They manage to get Susan into emergency care, and she survives the overdose that she's taken. But can you imagine just what a horrible, massive shock that's been for those two kids? I mean, just horrendous. How do you don't ever forget that. You couldn't possibly ever unforget that. You couldn't. Of course you couldn't. When Susan comes back from that experience, she decides that she needs to get out of America. She needs to get away from Brian, and she wants to go back to Wales. And so, that's what she does. She takes the two kids, she takes Casey, and she takes Bradley, and they go with her to Wales. Now, she's still got family in Wales, so she thinks that this is going to be a better life for her and for the kids. So there they are. They are in Wales. Ooh, I love being Welsh. Yes, it's the Welsh accent again. But can you imagine, right? For Bradley and Casey, who've literally come from Oklahoma, they're going to be like, what? I'm sorry, what are you all saying? What is this language? When Bradley starts school, there's a lot of bullying straight away. And really, the bullying is because Bradley is tiny. He's really small for his age. So he's maybe 13, possibly 14 when he starts high school in Wales. So you've got all these Welsh kids. And then you've got Bradley, who's this tiny little thing. I mean, I think he was about 4 feet something when he started in high school. He's this little scrawny boy with an American accent, and he's being thrust into this Welsh school. You know, he's got his little glasses, he's a bit of a geek. The other word, and I fucking hate this word, I hate it so much. The word effeminate gets used to describe Bradley a lot when he was a teenager. I just hate it. If there was a way, right, it'll never be possible, but if there was a way you could literally burn a word out of the English language, I would burn the word effeminate, because it's just offensive on every level. There is no positive spin you can put on the word effeminate, and it's what Bradley gets called a lot. So here he is, he's in high school in Wales, he's still really into his computers. There he is, he's working away on all of his little programmes. Now, he makes a couple of friends in school. Not masses of friends. Bradley's never going to be Joe Popular. He's never going to be that. But he does make a couple of little friends here and there. And after a few months of being friends, Bradley confesses to them that actually he's gay. Now he's only like 14, 15 at this point. But these friends are like, fine, okay, that's fine. We sort of thought that anyway, but good that you felt that you could share that with us. So Bradley actually starts to get on okay at school. He starts to make some okay relationships with teachers. He's getting on quite well. Yeah, like I said, he's never going to be Mr. Popular. Does Bradley want to be Mr. Popular? I don't think so. I don't think that interests him. But he's got some friends and he's doing well. And then high school finishes. Because here's the thing. I don't know, and I know in other countries, different ages and things for finishing high school happen. But in the UK, you can finish high school at 16 and walk away. And that's it. If you choose to, at 16 years old, go, that's it, I'm done with school, education, I'm going to go out and I'm going to get a job, that's fine, you can do that. It's a constant sort of battle here in the UK because they keep trying to extend it and say, no, you need to stay till you're 18, and then it got changed and it was like, you need to stay till you're 17 or whatever. But actually, within UK law, you get to 16, you are legally allowed to just walk away from school if that's what you want to do. Now, Bradley doesn't necessarily want to just walk away and, get up from school, but he's got this kind of burning desire in him to go back to America. He's sort of thinking maybe he would like to go back to the US. And that's what he does. He leaves Wales. He leaves his mum behind. He leaves his sister behind. They're in Wales. And Bradley goes back to Oklahoma, aged 16. So when he gets back, he moves in with his dad. And in the time that he's been gone and been living in Wales, his dad has remarried. His dad has remarried a woman called Susan, which was the name of his first wife. Insert obvious joke about, haha, we'll never have to worry you say the wrong name in bed, because she's the name of your first wife and your second. Oh my god, what a terrible dad joke. So Bradley spends a couple of years living with his dad and his now stepmom. And Bradley has kind of developed what I would say is a real sense of himself. He's just really quite confident in who he is. Maybe all of that being bullied at school, maybe living with fucked up parents has helped Bradley in that way. But who he's becoming is someone who's not actually that scared to just say what he actually thinks. People will say Bradley is very opinionated. The word arrogant gets used a lot. But he doesn't really take nonsense from anyone. He'll let you know his opinion about something, and if you don't like it, Bradley doesn't care. He just doesn't really give a fuck. If you don't like his opinion, don't listen to it. Now, after a couple of years of living with his dad and his stepmom, the relationships begin to break down a little bit. Bradley and his stepmom do not get along. Not in any way at all do they get on. So the situation is, he's kind of going around doing like low paid jobs, you know, without a great deal of direction. He's kind of got this vague idea of like, oh, I might want to do something with computers one day, but I don't really know what that is. Maybe I'll start some sort of amazing website, or I'll do something. By this point, he has been back from Wales for a couple of years, and he's just sort of going job to job. He's about to reach the age of 18, you know, and he works in Starbucks, and he's in call centres. Now, although his personality is quite strong, and he doesn't suffer fools gladly, he just sort of bobs about job to job. There's a incident at one point in a workplace where he makes a female employee cry, basically, and he gets fired from the job, and he's outraged that he's fired from the job. And when he's asked why he's being fired, his boss has to say to him, well, because basically you're arrogant as fuck and you make other employees cry because you're short-tempered if they don't understand everything straight away. If someone has to have something explained to them twice, you get really annoyed with that. And Bradley's a bit like, yeah, but if you need something explained to you twice, you're an idiot. Why can't you get it the first time round? He's just got that kind of like thing of going like, and it's not, people will say Bradley thought he was better than everyone else. I don't know if I think it's that he thought he was better than everyone else. I certainly think he thinks he's more intelligent than other people, but he's got very, very, very low patience for someone who doesn't just catch on to everything very quickly. He will become very impatient, become a bit snappy, and a lot of people just don't respond to that very well. Now, him and his stepmother, ooh, they do not get on. Sounds like I'm telling a fairy tale. Ooh, the boy and his stepmother, they don't get on. But no, they don't. Just like, he argues with Susan, his stepmother, all the time. Now, this happens. A phone call gets placed by Susan to 911 from their home, and she says this: my husband's 18-year-old son is out of control, and he just threatened me with a knife. His father has just had surgery and he's down on the floor. The 911 operator asks, does the teenager still have the knife? And his stepmother, Susan, she replies, no, he put it down somewhere. Susan continues to tell the 911 operator, he's standing here. He won't go away. I told him to get out of the room, but he won't leave. And the operator says, I will send police to the house immediately. Brian, when the police arrive, gets up off the floor. He's been on the floor because he's had surgery and he's in a lot of pain. He will crawl to his feet and he says to police, you know, there was just some kind of yelling and shouting and tossing things around, and we reached a point where Bradley just made my wife feel vulnerable, and you know, she was scared, so she called 911. At this point, Bradley is kicked out of the house. His father and stepmother get rid of Bradley from the house. No more ever really came from the police side of things, because Bradley might have been waving a knife around in the kitchen, who knows? Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. But no actual harm was caused. And so, police just don't have anything else to do with it. Bradley gets out of the house and he goes to live with an aunt who he hasn't seen for many, many years, but he had always gotten on with this aunt, and she too lives in Oklahoma. So Bradley is bobbing about job to job, sometimes within computers. He goes to work for a little while, I think, for a photography company, and then there's like a burger company, and he just, bobbing about. But what Bradley really, really wants is he wants to go to university, and he wants to study something to do with computers, technology, and information. That's what Bradley wants. Now, here's where we arrive at a conflicting part of the story. Because Bradley goes to talk to his dad, and out of that conversation, Brian, his dad, says to him, what you should do is join the army. If you join the US Army, you serve your 4 years, then at the end of it, they will pay for you to go to any university that you want to go to. So all those universities you're setting your sights on, you can go to, because they'll pay for it. And Bradley says, no, that's ridiculous. I'm not joining the army. Why would I join the army? I've never wanted to do this. Now, where we get a slight conflict here is because years later the story changes, and Bradley will say he was the one that actually wanted to join the army, and that his dad said, no, you're not cut out for this. You're not cut out for the army at all. So maybe we will never know whose version of the story there is true. One thing is for sure, put aside whose version of the story we believe here. One thing is for sure. Up until now, Bradley has had a very troubled and unstable, unsteady life, and that is about to change forever. If we just take stock and we look at this and we rethink it with a whole different focus, what if the entire life that Bradley had lived up until now, at the point where he is about to enter the US Army, what if up until that point everything had just felt like a massive, massive lie? It just felt like it wasn't right. Bradley had, since the age of 5, felt like he was female. He wanted to dress like a girl. He wanted to be feminine. Now, Bradley had actually gone to his dad at 10 years old during, that time when it was madness and there was drinking in the house and there was all of that. Bradley had gone to his dad and expressed these feelings. He'd said to his dad, I think I'm a girl. I think I'm female. I think this is what it is. He said, I just don't feel right. I want to be like Casey, his older sister. I want to wear the clothes that she wears, and I want to be a girl. Brian explained to him the basic biology that made that impossible. Brian basically said to him, well, no, you have male genitalia, and therefore you're male. That's what it is. That's end of conversation. That's what it is. But not end of. Not end of at all. Bradley wouldn't know this term at 10 years old because maybe, well, I don't think at 10 years old you do know this term, but he didn't know that at 10 years old he was suffering from gender dysphoria, being born into the wrong gender. It's something that a very well-known psychologist, when they talk about gender dysphoria, this is how they describe it. And at first when I read this, I remember thinking, oh, that sounds like the most basic way to put it. But yeah, the more I processed it, the more I was like, well, actually, maybe it's right. This doctor says gender dysphoria is like this. It's like the worst toothache you have ever had in your life. Imagine your worst toothache and imagine living with it 24 hours a day. And then imagine living with it 24 hours a day for years and years and years of your life. It just never goes away. Now I thought, that sounds a bit like a bloody rubbish way to describe it. But Bradley will say that's entirely accurate. That's exactly what it feels like. It's a constant pain in you that just will not go away. So, thinking back to Bradley's young life, his terrible home life, his being bullied at school, things are about to change in Bradley's life. Remember the words I used at the beginning. Resilient, independent, resourceful, and fragile. In 2007, Bradley Manning joins the US Army. And so ends part 1 of the story.
It didn't affect me really one way or the other. I would imagine from the look on his face, let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over. Let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over.